Hey, everybody. Welcome to Jimmy Wolf's Guitar Solo Countdown. In this episode, we're going to do a funk soul battle from 1981. We're doing Rick James's Street Songs versus Prince's Controversy. Uh, boom. There it is. So Jeff, what do these two acts have in common?
Well, they're both funky.
Both funky, yep. Yep.
They are both black.
Both black, yep.
Uh, it was a form of music that was not prevalent on MTV before,
Yep.
or not. There was very little. In fact, I think MTV started in '83, right? So we're like a little ahead of MTV, or we're pre-MTV right now.
And both were very famously spoofed by Dave Chappelle.
Yes. In my opinion, the Prince one was even funnier than the Rick James one.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Rick James one is a bit more popular. It's sort of is part of the Rick James legacy now. But
I
yeah,
think everybody can picture Rick James just being a complete lunatic. But
yeah.
it was far more funny for me to picture Prince playing basketball in his getup.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
That was truly funny
it was
on
awesome.
every level.
I think I like the Prince one better too. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so I'll give a super quick introduction on both records, and then I'll throw it down to you. Okay. So both are funk soul records from the early 80s, 1981. This is Rick James's fifth record, and it's Prince's fourth.
Wow.
Both these artists are kind of well into their career. They're both. I don't know if Controversy was a big record for Prince. It wasn't his biggest. His biggest was Purple Rain. But this would be Rick James's peak for sure. They're both 8 tracks, short and sweet, and they're both great. So yeah, how about you take it away, Jeff?
Okay, here we go, Jimmy.
All
For
right.
me, this is a landslide victory.
Okay.
Man, Rick James, right here.
Interesting. Okay.
Um,
Yep.
I'm going to go on record as saying I did not like this Prince album. I listened to it in its entirety once, and then I went back to it again to peruse through it because my first reaction was the reaction I felt the same way on round two.
Yeah.
None of his greatest hits are on there. I find it interesting that you say that it's his fourth release because um, I don't find it a very well-rounded release. Um, I could certainly say Prince is he's trying to break out. He's trying to do something new. He's trying to break out of the mold. He's trying to be a bit political, a bit. He's trying to say something. To
Mhm.
me, it fell off the mark every time. There was one called like Annie Annie
Yeah. Annie Christian.
Annie Christian. I thought was a horrible song. It was just did not work on any level. Uh, Maybe mildly humorous, but it missed.
Mhm.
Whereas I found Rick James straight from the streets. This is now I know from being such a hip hop fan, like people love Prince, like like the black community, or certainly I shouldn't say the black community. I'm not part of the black community, but the hip hop crowd or the people that grew up to make the music that I liked, they love Prince. They're like all their they were obviously a lot of these guys, like, on the West Coast, Ice Cube and Ice T in the early 80s, they were very young. They would have been young teenagers, but all their aunts and uncles loved Prince. Uh, but this is the real album for the streets. I mean, to me, uh, I almost feel it's a bit unfair to judge street songs against controversy, even though they were the same year, because Street Song has all of Rick James's greatest songs, and you're putting it up against a Prince album that was not nearly his best. Prince got way better after, for sure. Like we're not even in the ballpark of his greatest hits. I found the production sparse. I found it minimal, and I don't know. I think back then Prince was still doing everything on his album. He was the whole kit and caboodle. Also, I think Rick James was though too. Rick James, they, the one thing it's a good comparison in the fact that both guys could play a lot of instruments. They're multi instrumentalists. Um, and to be honest, I don't know who did what on what album, but I know they both had a lot of control issues in their career about who was going to play what, and you know, uh, Rick James, very talented bass player, guitar player. Same with Prince, though. I found the vocals on the Prince album to be the vast majority of them are in that falsetto, which
Mhm.
sometimes works for Prince. In fact, in his later work, it's in the like Kiss, uh, Raspberry Beret,
Yeah.
it works. But Rick James, man, his vocals just soar. He has a powerhouse voice. That guy can hit some big notes, and he can sustain them for a long time. So, in terms of vocal qualities, I don't think it was Prince's best showing, but Rick James is firing on every cylinder here. Um, if I'm not mistaken, this says it's Quality Records, but I believe Rick James is signed to Motown, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. It says Gordy. I think Gordy is like a offshoot of Motown. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Rick James obviously had the money behind him. The production is a lot more lavish. There's there's saxophones and stuff. It just sounds bigger and better to me. It sounds fuller. And um Give It to Me Baby, great. Ghetto Life, I love the song Mr. Policeman, like
Hmm.
talking about not messing with the brothers on the corner. However, I do feel it is a little, I'm not going to say insincere of Rick James, because I mean Rick James is from the streets, like really the real streets, like not, he wasn't catapulted to fame at a young age. He worked for his. I think Rick James is already in his 30s in 81. He might have been in his young 30s, but he was in his 30s. Anyways, it is a little, he's trying to make social commentary, but I saw a recent biography on Rick James where uh, there was, he was a bit of a hometown hero. I think he's from Detroit, or if it's not Detroit, one of the local suburbs of Detroit. Am I right about that?
So originally he was from Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. Yes, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was incorrect about that. But anyways, the hood, and he was always a hometown hero. He moved around a lot, but he would go back home frequently. That's where his family's from. And there was interviews with people on the block that would say that when Rick would come home, he would routinely drive to go cop some blow from the dealer down the street. He would drive his limousine and hop out of the limo wearing these fucking higher than your knees, thigh high red leather boots and leather suits and shit like that to go cop drugs. So,
Yeah.
I mean, really, he was a police magnet, right? Like he's a walking heat score. So,
Yeah.
anyways, be that as it may, the Fire and Desire with Tina and Marie, beautiful ballad, all things considered, and introduced Tina Marie to the scene. I don't really know much about her career, if she had a relatively long career or not, but that was a wonderful song. What else we got here? Um, Below the Funk, Past the Joint. Um,
Yeah.
Rick James wasn't shy about talking about the weed smoke. He didn't lie about his indulgent lifestyle.
Mhm.
Um, there's something I respect about that. And where, Rick James is gonna say pass the joint. You had Prince. There's a song called Jack Me Off or something on Controversy.
Jack you off.
Yeah, not a misfire. It was it was just lewd isn't the proper word. It was an attempt to be over the top that just didn't hit to me. It was Prince is better when he's not as direct, when he's more subtle. And like
Mhm.
to me, direct is Rick James, cop and blow, that kind of thing. Super freak, that's pretty direct, the kind you don't bring home to mother. You know, it's
Yeah.
it I would hate to say that Prince was copying Rick James, but the similarities were there. It almost seems to me after listening to those two albums that Rick James was the king of the streets, the king of the funk, present day, and that Prince is trying to muscle his way into some of that territory. And Prince sure found his mark on Purple Rain and eclipsed Rick James, and there was a big, you know, the two of them just couldn't be happy for each other. They were rivals, but
Mhm.
yeah, to me, Controversy just didn't work at all. I didn't like it.
Mhm.
And to me, I quite like Street Songs by Rick James. It's a good album. It's a good, well crafted album as a whole. I think there were very few missteps. Um, there's nothing that I didn't like on it. Um, so that's my take on things. I even like the cover. I even like the policeman grabbing Rick James's bum.
That's awesome. It's a great album cover. Those boots are wild. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they have to be women's boots, aren't they? Like,
Yeah.
really,
They
like
look
that
like
has to be a woman's costume. But
definitely look they look like hooker boots for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Um cool. Okay. So I've got a different take. I actually love the Prince record.
wow,
Yeah, yeah, love it. I did an episode on Prince earlier back on Jimmy Wolf, and I reviewed every record that Prince did, and I absolutely love um his second, third, and fourth albums. I
wow.
think Dirty Mind is incredible. I love the self-titled album as well. Yeah, I love it. I think he nails it. Um, I do. I mean, I will say that I understand like the kind of the sort of throwback '50s rock feel of Jack You Off and what was it called? Ronnie Call Russia. Yeah, Ronnie Talk to Russia. Yeah, he does that '50s throwback thing or that kind of classic rock throwback thing, which I think could probably be an acquired taste. I totally get it and I love it. But yeah, love this Prince record. Love it. I also love that. So Prince has this weird thing that he does where he does this. He's extremely Christian, but he's also very overtly sexual too, which is it seems like a bit of a dichotomy because
Mm-hmm.
most Christians tend to hide their sexuality, right? But Prince
Uh,
doesn't do that.
if I may interject, Jimmy, I believe Prince is a Jehovah's Witness, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, yeah, that, I
I'm
think you're
pretty
right.
sure that's his actual religion was Jehovah's Witness, which you're right is even more of a dichotomy. I think because you've
Yep.
got a lot of Christian or say Catholic artists that were pretty sexual, like Elvis, Madonna, and but you certainly don't hear of a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that are that made it in the industry. But you're right, it is something that is it's definitely a strange dichotomy in
Yeah.
Prince's character.
Okay. So yeah. So I love the Prince record. The Rick James album I like too. I mean, Give It to Me, Baby, and Super Freak are just classic songs. Super Freak, famously covered by or sampled by MC Hammer. So that's how I first heard it when I was
Me too. Me too.
like a youngin, right? Like obviously discovering Super Freak, it's like, oh wow, this is so much better.
It
Especially
is so much better.
so much better.
I
Um,
have a funny story about Super Freak, or more like MC Hammer's version, but I remember hearing that so that was '89, I think, no, when Hammer came
90.
out with Can't Touch This,
Yeah.
or maybe it was summer or spring of 1990.
It was 90, yeah.
But anyways, Rick James, like it's 9 years since Street Songs. He's well past his prime. He's going through his money, but still living like a rock star. Um, he was in his limousine, driving around town or whatever, and on the radio, and he's party going on in the limo, and then he hears my music hits me. He loses it and gets right on the phone with his manager and says, and so as a side note too, Rick James didn't like people. He was a lot like the old rockers that were like, unless you can play your shit, and didn't have a lot of respect for like the sampling movement, and wasn't big into hip hop or anything like that, because those guys don't play. They're not composers like Rick James was. So, anyways, he gets on the phone in the limo on his car phone with his manager, and his manager says he loses, like, who the fuck's using my record? And you know, and his manager says, Rick, calm down, buddy. I'm gonna make your day, buddy. Guess how much money I got for you for that fucking idiot to use Super Break. He says how much? He goes 50 large, and Rick James like woo! Hangs up the phone. But his manager, being so short sighted, sold it for 50 grand flat out, no royalties.
What?
50 grand. Sorry. He sold it for a $50,000 lump sum payment, which was huge back then, right? Because a lot of times it was before there had been an actual ruling, and sampling was up in the air, and like some people were getting away with it. Vanilla Ice did, Ice Ice Baby and overtly sampled Queen, didn't pay them any money. So Rick James thought he got away with murder. But You Can't Touch This sold 10 million copies.
Yeah.
And had he taken, royalties on the song, he would have been like incredibly wealthy off that. Yeah. But as it turns out, he was short-sighted. His manager, and Rick James from that point on said, no one ever uses my music. There's no sampling of my music at all, except he did become friendly with some rappers. Like I know some rappers like reached out to him. He was friends with Ice Cube, obviously. Okay. But I mean, I know some rappers used his music, but they were friends of his and got specific permission. Like if you didn't know him, you weren't allowed. Gotcha. He had to give specific permission to you as a person to use and hear the version that you were making first. He didn't just, and even in the in the 90s when all of he was in a bad way, he still took his music very seriously and his legacy. And
okay.
To be honest, I don't remember Prince ever letting anybody sample his music either, but that's another story. But also I find it during that documentary I saw about Rick James, it was one of the guys in the band that were talking about Super Freak, and he said that was all Rick, 100%. There was no, and it was based on some chick, some groupie that her and Rick had a thing, but the track itself is very funk. The bass line is pure funk, but then the thing that made it cross over into the pop market was that little keyboard effect of womp womp, and it was just that little thing that Rick James, he's like, the track needs a little bit more. And it was one of those things that was just that Rick did well. he was good about it. It kind of that track kind of crossed over into the new wave, um, with the new wave end of things too. I mean, it had keyboards and guitars and saxes and basses, and it was funky, but it could cross over too. And that was all Rick. That the band fully gives Rick James all the credit in the world for that. He was the one that completely composed that, and he was responsible for getting it on the radio. And he was very upset that his music didn't get played on MTV, and specifically mad at didn't understand how Prince can get played, but he couldn't, even though, quite frankly, his music is more overtly crude in a way, or the subject matter is more crude than Prince's. Prince later on, once he became in the Purple Rain days, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
just with his weird kind of persona, the music itself was. Rick James might have seemed a little, I don't know, dangerous, and Prince, even though.
Oh,
What was the lady that went on to put the stickers on the records?
Tipper Gore.
Tipper Gore, right? There were 10 records that she chose, and Prince had one of them. One was Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, I think, was one of them. But anyways, Prince was one because it was overtly sexual,
Yeah.
and but I don't think anybody like she was an old woman, and to her batty old lady sensibilities, that was something that parents need to be worried about. But the kids weren't scared of it at all. Prince wasn't scary, or but maybe Rick James was a little bit, because he was talking about some pretty. I just think talking about some more. It was more for the streets, and I guess
Mhm.
I guess that's why the hip hop community really gravitated more towards Rick James than Prince, even though for sure everybody loved Prince. I remember even in that same interview, Ice Cube saying like there was one king of the streets back then. In the '70s, it was Parliament Funkadelic, and then when Rick James hit, Rick James was the new king. And Prince might have been on the radio, but Rick James was the one that everybody loved. Everybody truly, truly loved Rick James records. And maybe your white friends might like Prince too, but all your homies. In fact, I remember Ice Cube saying when Street Songs came out, he had an older brother, and his older brother had a buddy that lived up the street. His parents they were always working late, so Ice Cube and his brother would go over to the buddy's house where you could like smoke dope in the basement and stuff. And I think he was like 15 in 1981, and when Street Songs came out, he remembers going over to his buddy's or his brother's buddy's house, smoking dope in the basement, listening to Mary Jane, and then thinking that it's about this like super sexy girl, and then his brother's buddy goes, "No, you idiot! It's supposed to smoking dope. It's supposed to smoking weed. It's marijuana." And Ice Cube was like, he had a revelation. Then it's like, it's not only a great song, but he's kind of a clever songwriter too. And
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot
It's
of the
not
stuff
song
in
for
that
him.
era was a little bit just weird, or like Parliament Funkadelic's kind of way out there. But Rick James, a little more, I don't know, clever, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, that's my take on Rick James, bitch.
Cool. Okay. I made a mistake. You were right. Rick James did play most of the instruments on the album. It was
Wow,
uh,
okay.
it was labeled very oddly on Wikipedia here. Yeah. He probably played. I'm not sure if he did as much as Prince did, but close to it. It says that he played everything. Or
He also had a full band that
yeah.
and back in the early days, the band also said that Rick was very fair with them. They were like a big gang, but then obviously the more famous Rick got, the more of a distance there was between the band. I think also I think I remember hearing that he played a lot of the instruments in Street Songs because this is about the time when he's starting to realize like how much money you can really make in the music business. and he knows like the more work he does, the more money he's going to make in the long run. So of course he can't play all the instruments live like when he's on tour, but like in the studio he can, and like written, produced, and arranged by Rick James, and he played all the instruments. Like he made all the money off it, all of it, right?
Mhm.
So you're not really sharing anything with anyone except maybe a little bit with Tina Marie, but that's really about it. So
Mhm.
I think Rick is really conscious of trying to maximizing his earning potential, which also in the same vein might have been why uh, his career started to go, why there was a bit of a downfall after this, because he's starting to get too concerned with money. And I
Mhm.
remember one more thing about that documentary that I remember hearing. There was an executive um, that was in charge of Rick James. And, after Street Songs, Rick, mega famous, super rich. And, but there's other up and comers in the Motown, in the Motown scene. You got Lionel Richie is creeping on a come up there, right? I mean, Lionel Richie's first album in 1980, if I'm not mistaken, the self titled one was Gathering Steam. I think the one with Hello was 82, if I'm not mistaken. Dancing on the Ceiling, I think, was 84. But, anyways, the story goes that Rick James had a meeting with Berry Gordy to discuss the success, or uh, it wasn't like the whatever album came out after Street Songs. And Rick James said, so whatever, this is like 82, 83. He busts in the office late, of course, and he's like, man, y'all motherfuckers aren't promoting me, and this is bullshit. And he said, I made 30 fucking $1 million off of Street Songs, and off this new album, I only made three. Like, what the fuck is going on here? And man, you guys suck. And he apparently uh, broke out a massive line of cocaine on Berry Gordy's desk, snorted it, and then kept on spewing profanities at him and said, fuck this, I don't need you fucking guys, I'm Rick James, and stormed out. And Berry Gordy just said to the executive, he said, you, Lionel Richie, like meaning you start putting all your efforts into Lionel Richie. Rick James is no longer the big cash cow, right? We're going to start making Lionel Richie the big star.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
and
gotcha.
lo and behold, Lionel Richie, into the stratospheres of fame, well outsold Rick James. I think maybe it was even bigger than Prince in the 80s. So, anyway.
Yeah, yeah, Purple Rain was huge. That was 25 million. That was insane.
What
Um
about the Lionel Richie album, the
good,
one with Hello? Or
sure that was huge too. Yeah.
maybe not 25 million, though. But maybe you're right.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff. So let me just finish off really quickly here. So yeah,
Sure.
so Street Songs. Yeah, so I do like this record too. So for me, the issue I have with Rick James is I'm not a huge fan of his voice. I He's a good singer, and he's an incredible performer. Uh, his voice is a personal thing to me. I find it a little grating. So that kind of knocks Rick James down a little bit for me. Uh, Now this record, yeah, Super Freak's amazing. Love the first song. Now the duet with Tina Marie, I absolutely love that song. That song always it brings me to tears when I hear that song. So that song could actually be my favorite song of both records.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, at first it starts off, you think, oh man, this is like Rick James doing a ballad. It's got to be really cheesy, but then it just, I mean, they nail it. I mean, it's like
They do.
it's great soul, right? It's perfect. Um,
It's interesting also to hear that Rick James has such chemistry with another singer, which,
oh yeah,
especially when, you know, like you hear about all the issues he had with control and not wanting anybody. There was a lot of also, I don't know if you're aware of the controversy like between Prince and Morris Day and all that, how Prince put them on, but then Morris Day actually kind of became popular, and Prince had a problem with them. And then two of the guys that were in the time, uh, Jimmy Jam and whatever their names were, they went on to produce like Janet Jackson and stuff, and they went on to super fame themselves. But Rick or Prince had a problem with other people, like becoming famous, and like Rick James just, by all accounts, he had the same kind of thing. Everyone wanted them to know that Rick James is the man, and everyone else was second. But he had no problem like completely giving Tina Marie like equal footing on that song, which I don't think ever happened after that. Rick James never shared the spotlight with anybody, right? So I
Yeah.
find that pretty impressive.
Yeah. I mean, she was an amazing singer too. So I mean, I
He was.
probably a musical respect for sure. Okay, so yeah, so I'm definitely gonna go with the Prince record. I prefer the Prince album. Yeah, yeah. I'm a huge Prince fan. You know, I always have been. So that's where I'm usually gonna fall. So yeah,
Understood.
we're a little differing today, but that's fine.
Today we are at loggerheads, Mr. Wolf, but sometimes you got to agree to disagree, right?
Yeah, yeah. The Lionel Richie album, "Can't Slow Down." That was the one
That's
with
it.
"Hello." Yes, that sold over 20 million. That was huge as well. Yeah, probably just as big as Purple Rain. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, that must have been a tough time for Rick James because yeah, it was definitely a slow decline, pretty serious decline actually. He ended up didn't he end, like kidnapping a girl and going to prison for a while?
Yeah, he was charged. He had a lot of charges in the late '80s, but the worst one was uh, kidnapping, forcible confinement,
Oof.
and like apparently he like burned this chick with a he burned her upper thighs with a crack pipe. That was
Yeah.
uh
Uh,
yeah, I mean apparently word is that he accused her of like stealing drugs, of like pocketing some, obviously he probably he had a big mountain of whatever drugs on the counter or whatever, and he comes in after an hour or whatever, and there's like a significant portion of it gone.
oh.
And he's like, "Yo, where the fuck did all my drugs go?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know. He did it."
It's just it's just a drug fueled mayhem where all that weird stuff's gonna happen. That sucks.
Yeah, and another sad thing that I want to mention too is in that documentary was incredible. If you can ever find it, I wish I could remember what it was called, but uh, the saddest thing about the comparison between these two is how far Rick James slid, and
Yeah,
how Prince was at the top of his game even when he died.
yeah,
Like Prince had no sign of slowing down, still making great music. Has this legendary vault full of stuff that will be released year after year.
yeah,
But at the so Rick or Dave Chappelle did that thing. It was like what 2004, something like that, maybe 2003. It was really funny, and Rick James saw the humor in it too.
yeah,
Um, but anyways, there was a bit of a resurgence in Rick James' popularity, obviously because of that.
yeah.
So it was maybe the BET Awards or the Soul Train Awards or something. They were honoring Rick James, and he did a duet with Tina Marie. He did that Fire and Desire,
Yeah.
but he really it was a awful performance. It was dreadful. Rick James, he lost it, man. Like it was sad to see. It was that bad. Like, you
Yeah.
know, I, I never, I never want to kick a man when he's down. And it's especially so sad to see that, like that's a good looking man right there. If I do say so myself, you know, I don't know how tall he was, but he's thin, handsome, great hair,
Yeah.
nice braids. And he was fat, bloated. In these days he could belt out the tunes.
Yeah.
Soaring voice. And just in that performance, which was, just 20 years later, it was dreadful. Like, he lost it. He squandered his talent. And Prince, Prince held firm with his talent, and
Yep.
it's just a real shame. It's a real shame when you see somebody waste the gift that they have. And Rick James was certainly talented. And, rest in peace, Rick James, and Prince for that matter. Um, it's just it's an awful tale of the excesses of celebrity, and what a little bit of fame and
Yep.
a little bit of fame can do to you. Rick James really believed the hype. He really believed he was the fucking man.
Yeah.
And one more story I'm gonna from that documentary, like Roxanne Shante, who was a rapper from like the golden age. She started rapping when she was like 12, but she got a record deal when she was 14. Anyways, with the Juice Crew, I think her first record was maybe 1986, maybe it was 87. But anyways, in like 1989 or 1990, she went to go work with Rick James, and she stayed in Rick's house for a month to collaborate with him. Well past both their primes, again, 1990 for Rick James, whatever, and well past Roxanne Shante's prime. But she said Rick had this girlfriend or this chick that was staying with him, and he only ever called her bitch. He never addressed her by her real name. And she did whatever he wanted, like, yo, bitch, get up and make me some fucking breakfast. Bitch, give me my motherfucking bathrobe. And she was like his servant. Yeah, like, he was really very unkind to specifically that woman, but Roxanne Shante said it was a shame. And as a young girl, she didn't have the courage to, like, she never even knew that girl's name. She just knew her as bitch.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it's a shame that, people treat people that way. And, I'm not going to weigh in on Rick's. It's just a shame. Everything about the way his career went, and how he ended up is a real shame. There were certainly not a lot of hits. There were no hits after Street Songs. And, his fame was eclipsed by other artists for sure. And maybe he clung on to a bit of success by playing live. I mean, he might have still had the chops to play live, and but he never had any more hits.
Yeah.
And
Your ego is not your amigo.
that's true, definitely. Well said.
Yeah.
And
And it's also a shame too that so Rick James, Prince, and Tina Marie all have all passed,
yeah.
unfortunately. So
All we're left with is Morris Day.
yeah, yeah. But you know what? They left us great music.
They did.
Um, and yeah, we can all still enjoy these amazing songs. But yeah, that was a good one. That was a good.
I think at the very least, we can say. I mean, you like all those early Prince records. I think you can definitely say without a shadow of a doubt, at least Rick James left one classic record, one
Yeah.
good front to back.
Yeah.
And, for better or for worse, that's a pretty big achievement in the pop music landscape. It's Super Freak it's an epic tune. I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody knows You Can't Touch This by Hammer too, but everybody loves Super Freak. And what a weird song for people to dig too, about a kinky chick that you don't bring home to mother.
Yeah.
So good on him, Rick James.
Yeah, it's like his lyrics have this they have this really upfront real quality, but in kind of a goofy delivery. It's really interesting. Like it's kind of serious subjects approached, kind of in a tongue-in-cheek kind of way. It's yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. He definitely has his own unique thing, his own unique delivery.
I would think probably he would be a pretty fun dude to hang out with. Uh, I
Mm.
mean, obviously, it would have been a party 24/7 anywhere around Rick James, but whereas from all accounts, Prince was an odd fella, like
For sure.
a weird guy.
Yeah.
It was quiet, soft-spoken, hard to knit, like, just by all accounts, a hard nut to crack. Whereas, I mean, if you want to believe the Dave Chappelle, I mean, not like that's probably an accurate account of Rick James, but I bet you Rick James could throw a fucking party. That's for sure. And I bet he was a wild. One other really funny story I got about Rick James too. There was he just bought this massive house in L.A. and this was the guitar player of the band told this story. It's 19. Maybe it's right after Street Songs. He bought this massive house in L.A. You know, threw a big, huge Hollywood party. Anyone who wants to come, chicks everywhere. There was tons of blow and alcohol and naked people fucking everywhere. And anyways, Rick James had a thing for Jim Brown's daughter, the football player. Jim Brown built like a Mack truck, big, tough. And anyways, so Rick James, he was notorious ladies man. Anyways, Jim Brown comes screeching down the driveway, parks his car, busts in the front door. Yo, man, where's that motherfucking Rick James? So Rick James, like, he's upstairs. Who the fuck is that? It's Jim Allen. He wants her. Did I get the name right? But anyways, yeah, he's I want to have a word with Rick. Rick jumped out of the second floor, out of his bedroom window into the bushes and ran off because he was so scared of getting his ass kicked. Because whether he fucked the guy's daughter or not, or was just trying to, or whatever, but dude, man, they were going to make an example out of him, and he hightailed it out of there. Wow. He was not having any of it, and that guy was serious. That guy was going to kick his ass. So,
like in the middle of his own party too. That's great.
Rick James knew when to run too. So,
yeah, smart.
Yeah, very.
All right, Jeff, I think that's probably good for now. So, so catch us probably next week for another. I'm assuming we're going to do another album battle.
Always, Mr. Wolf. I'm always available Sunday nights for such intense discussions.
All right, sounds good. I think you should choose the next.
Give me a couple days to peruse it over, and I'll come up with something good.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, take care, buddy. Nice talking to you.
All right, see you, Jeff.
Bye now.